Right. Welcome, everybody. And I know it's lunchtime in the US. Hopefully you have your sandwiches with you. This is the Research Librarians and Society Publishers working together to advance OA and research lively discussion. We have three terrific speakers who are going to do lightning presentations to do some framing in this space. We have Gaynor Redvards-Mutton from the Microbiology Society, Rod Cookson from the publishing arm of the Institute of Water, and Judy Russell, the Dean of Libraries at the University of Florida. We're also joined by Adam Chesler, who's our facilitator, who's going to be keeping a good eye on the chat and the discussion. And really essential for us to have a lively discussion are all of you. We need all of you to engage and participate. It's going to be possible to unmute to speak later. So if you've got questions, if you'd like to speak, to ask a question, please could you include it in the chat, and we will manage that as we go along. Thank you ever so much. The other way you can engage, and I'll try to keep an eye on this, is via Twitter. And the Charleston hashtag is @CHSConf, CHSCONF. So get poised to engage. What we're going to be exploring today is what's been learned about building open access agreements between libraries and society publishers or other small not-for-profit publishers. This is going to be an opportunity to surface some actual experiences in the space gained through a series of pilot projects and recent agreements. Some of this work undertaken in the context of a Coalition S funded project called Society Publishers Accelerating Open Access and Plan S. So without further ado, let's hear from the experiences of some of our society presenters, and then we'll go to Judy for a strategic library perspective. Over to you, Gaynor.
Hello there. Good to speak to you. Good morning if it's still morning over there, and good afternoon if it's not. I'm going to share my screen here and hope that you can all see that now. So I want to introduce myself. I'm Gaynor Redvards-Mutton. I work at the Microbiology Society, and the Microbiology Society is a membership charity for scientists interested in microbes. And we publish 6 journals. They're listed up here, 4 of which are hybrid, and the 2 newest born OA journals. Publishing is part of our strategic mission, and we've remained proudly independent, doing the full range of publishing activities. We've been on a pretty long OA journey to this point, a good 10 years, probably more than that. And this latest evolution comes from directly from since the Plan S announcement. And I think the one thing I would say about it is, right off the bat, it has definitely been a more collaborative phase of open access than any other of our initiatives. Transforming a business model such as journal subscriptions takes lots of communications to find common cause and shared goals. And one example of that was a meeting a couple of months back when a group of society publishers were brought together with the help of Alicia and Information Power to talk to the folk at ASIRL. And we had a really fully open and frank discussion about ups and downs, motives and hindrances for both sides in collaborating on transformative deals. And really, it was a very good talk, very enlightening, and we hope that we can create a little bit of that again here today. So we're here to talk about transformative agreements, which is a new route to open access. They are designed to move us at pace to a fully open access future. Plan S and funders have an aggressive timetable requiring active implementation of new models. They acknowledged that this would be a challenge for small and independent society publishers like us, and they put some measures in place to help us achieve the transition without falling over. The Microbiology Society came to an early decision about what will work for us, and that is a publish and read transformative agreement. A little bit about it. It works with existing sales channels, so it works like a subscription. It covers the full breadth of what we produce, which are, as I said, the hybrids as well as the fully open access journals. There are no pay down funds to manage, so it's a really properly unlimited use of the journals in its fullest sense, both publishing and access without any caps. And just to talk a little bit more about what went into the considerations of our publish and read model, it was designed to be cost neutral. It was designed to repurpose institutional subscription spend. It was adding a publish element to a subscription in a fair and transparent way. It was adding researcher benefit to an institutional package. We were trying to avoid the ills of APCs, avoid double dipping. And finally, it was designed to be administratively light. We wanted a really simple model with as little fuss and bother as we could manage. So just talk through some of the institutional benefits. Publish and read puts institutions right back in the centre of the funding cycle for scholarly communications. As I mentioned, purchases are made via existing and efficiently running channels. It takes authors out of that payment cycle, relieving them of financial and administrative responsibilities. Funder buy-in means we're on the right side of compliance, and reporting to enable information flow between publisher or consortia, the institution and funders is rightly the focus of much attention. And I've no doubt that the future and the coming year will see good initiatives in this area. We, Microbiology Society, have 80 institutions signed up to our deal. And we're really pleased at that positive take up, because these were pilots and they were experimental. There's been really a great welcome to the initiative from researchers, and libraries as an essential stakeholder have played a really positive role in making them work, telling us about their needs and requirements. So we're now at a stage where we have to expand and manage more relationships to push the model even further forward and avoid being left in a limbo land, i.e. not at sufficient scale to fully transform. That would be the bad outcome. We want to transform fully. But I would just leave on one note, which is the absolute arbiter of success. We have moved to the dial on how much open access we publish. 1 year ago, we were at under 20% of our content. And remember, we have 2 fully open access journals, but under the 20% mark. And we're on track now to push that over 30% of our articles being published fully OA. Thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah.
Brilliant, Gaynor. Thank you for getting us started. And Rod, straight over to you.
Great. Right. I am, okay. I'm trying to, hello everyone. My name is Rod Cookson. I am the Managing Director of IWA Publishing, and I'm looking to share the screen and find the right option here, and it's not offering it to me. Right. In which case I will go for the desktop. This might look slightly odd, but I'll minimize all of the things you guys don't want to see and show you the presentation. Can you see this? How's that working?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to minimize all the people. Okay, so we're all here in Charleston, sunny Charleston, for a nice relaxed conversation before lunchtime. As I say, I'm from the IWA Publishing. I'm the managing director. And a little bit of background in who we are and why we're interested in open access. We are a not-for-profit publisher. We're owned by a learned society with about 8,000 members. And our mission is disseminating knowledge and good research about clean drinking water and good sanitation worldwide. And just to give you a little context for why that matters as an issue, there are still close to 2 billion people around the world who do not have decent sanitation, 800 million people who don't have clean drinking water. And if you want a statistic to stick in your mind from today, 1/3 of schools around the world do not have clean drinking water in them. That's the problem we're trying to solve in an existential sense. We publish 17 research journals and also some books each year. And for the past 5 years, we have been actively looking to move to open access in manageable, realistic, practical steps. And just to give a little benchmark of how we've progressed, our first open access article was in 2006. And by 2016, we published 100 open access articles. In that period, we published around 14,000 articles in total. So we were going at quite a slow rate to start off with. We have accelerated our open access initiatives since then. We flipped Journal of Water Reuse and Desalination to open access in 2017. That's quite a small journal. That was a relatively simple thing to do and not particularly challenging. It's worked very well for that journal, but it's not really fundamentally changing our program. We've launched a generalist journal, H2Open Journal, and a niche journal in an emerging important field, blue-green systems, which are both open access. And we have a Spanish and Portuguese language journal, Engenharia del Agua, which has always been free on a diamond open access model. So we have a few ways to open access sort of for some years now. And in 2020, this year, we made a rather radical decision to make hydrology research, which is one of our largest journals, open access by simply flipping it from a subscription to an APC model. And that involved IWA losing a 6-figure sum of revenue in the process. And obviously we hope that in the course of time, we get back to the level of revenue we had from that journal before. But part of our thought process is we do want to move towards open access. We want to understand how it operates, how we can reach it. And we're happy to invest some money in moving that discussion forward. Like Gainer, like the Microbiology Society, we also have some read and publish agreements. We signed deals in the Netherlands and Austria in 2019, which are important areas of research for us. And we're very grateful to FVF and Chemo in Austria and to VSNU and many librarians in the Netherlands that we work with. And likewise, this year, we've added agreements with JISC in the UK and with 6 core institutions in Sweden. And again, BIBSM have been very helpful in that conversation. It's not done through BIBSM, but again, this is helping us broaden out our open access offering. We have more discussions underway, but when you put all of those things together, at the end of 2019, we found that only 16% of what we had published in the year was open access, and that includes Research for Life initiatives and other philanthropic schemes. The conclusion we came to was we were moving forward, but it was very slow and the world was moving around us and we wanted to move quicker. So we are now moving to a subscribe to open, an S2O model for next year, using the existing subscriber base and taking that as the basis for an open access model in future. So if you are able to support us, if you're one of our subscribers or you would like to support S2O, please do get behind that. This is just a bit of information and I'll put the URL in the chat when I finish talking. But essentially for us, subscribe to open is a way of using existing infrastructure to deliver far better outcomes for researchers in our field and far better outcomes for researchers in every country around the world, which with our sort of a health-focused mission is very important to us. We understand that change is complicated and change is slow, and with complicated change, it's easy to get things wrong. So we like subscribe to open being based on well-proven, well-developed infrastructure in libraries, and we like libraries being involved as good custodians of research. And we think this is a sensible way to take a next step towards open access. That's a little bit of a history of who we are, where we are, and where we're going. I also wanted to pose 3 questions, just generally to everyone on this call and to my fellow panelists about the future and how we can work together. The first is a sort of a fundamental how we do things question. You know, Gaynor mentioned the conversations we've had with ASERL in recent years, in recent months. We talked to many librarians that we've known for years. We've got to know many more librarians through read and publish agreements and other discussions. As a publisher, we find those fantastically helpful. And I think a lot of the open access challenges that we all face are best solved by librarians and society publishers like the Microbiology Society and IWA Publishing, working together to develop solutions that solve both the problems that we have from both sides. So that's my first general question to throw out there. I'm also curious, we have read and publish agreements. They are extremely difficult to negotiate. Anecdotally, publishers of every size say that they're difficult to negotiate. They're all different from country to country, from publisher to publisher. It's a great deal of work. How can we find ways to make it easier to develop these agreements, to take some of the administrative burden out of developing them so that librarians can get better value for the money they spend with publishers, and we can help serve our communities better. And lastly, we're moving to an S2O model. It is an experimental model. Obviously, annual reviews, Bergham Books have made good progress with that model. We're interested in how we can make it a permanent piece of the infrastructure in the field. So there are obviously models we can look back to, like Scope 3, that have done interesting work. There are ways that S2O models can evolve over time. We see it as the start of a process, and we would like to work with other people in the community to move it forward and allow it to become something that's useful for all of the players in the field. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to allow Judy to pick up with her component now. Over to you, Judy.
Thank you. So they mentioned the ASERL meeting, and I participated in that. There were 5 of those small independent publishers that met with a group of us who are members of the Association of Southeast Research Libraries. And it was a very lively discussion, actually, and I think very beneficial. I think there are a couple of challenges right now. I think with COVID-19, we're all facing rather difficult budget situations, and it's a hard time to take on new things. And that, I think, is something that we recognize. I think in the academic library setting, it's certainly difficult for most of us to aggregate the money that might be being spent on APCs around our campuses and bring those into play. So the read and publish agreements give us another interesting approach. I've been very focused at the University of Florida in how do we help and support our authors. And so the idea that we can reduce the barriers to authors choosing open access, which primarily beats the funding, but also the administrative issues. And so I have actually, I have one larger transformative agreement with Elsevier, but I'm now in the process of getting into several small transformative agreements with some of these publishers, which we're very pleased to see moving forward. And I think the issues that Rod is raising are very important ones, because if every one of these agreements is unique and every one of them needs to be negotiated individually, it's a burden on each of the societies, but it's also a burden on us and on our staff to try to do that. It's one reason that many of the small publishers have gone the way of allowing aggregators or larger publishers to subsume them and to manage their resources. And I think as librarians, many of us wish to support small independent publishers, and we like the idea that they're maintaining independent. And so this is an interesting way for us to join with them. I think another challenge that came up in the ASERL meeting, and I think that Rod and Gaynor would agree, is that part of these individual negotiations is the expectations that each library or library consortia has may be different. What's the data you need to deliver? What's the process we need to follow? And so the idea that we could move collectively towards some more common language and some more common data, I think Counter is a really good example where we spent a lot of time in our libraries trying to understand and analyze our usage. And it came from different publishers and it was defined differently. And harmonizing that has made life easier. I think the same thing could be really beneficial as we look at some of these read and publish agreements, not just for the small publishers, but it might be a place where the small publishers could actually lead the way and where libraries could work with the small publishers on defining what are our minimum basic needs of information that we need to have. What are the common elements of a license that we could all share so that at least the starting point for a negotiation is already on a kind of a common platform. We certainly like the idea that these would be cost neutral and also obviously the idea that this will help us avoid double dipping. I think, again, it's another place where it's a yin and yang, where we both have this opportunity to make this administratively light. We can't take on a huge burden either of administering these on our campuses, and they as small publishers can't take on a large administrative burden in offering them to us. So we have a mutual goal, I think, to come up with solutions that can work across multiple independent publishers and across multiple libraries and library systems that would allow us to move forward much more rapidly and with a reduced administrative burden. And I'd really like to come back to the idea that for me, and what I've sought as I've looked at these kinds of agreements for the University of Florida is really focused. I mean, obviously I'm always worried about my budget, right? We all are, but that's not the starting point for me. The starting point for me is how do I support our authors across the university? And so I look at these things as ways that really ease that up for our authors. And so we, as I say, have decided to move forward with some of these agreements for that reason. But even there, I think we could do more ourselves and move more rapidly if we had this commonality. And so one of the things I've been thinking about, and that I hope you all will help us talk about and think about, we have a toehold, if you will, already with ASERL because of this previous meeting, but talking to ASERL and some of the other consortia about how might we group together as libraries and then partner with this group of publishers and others to try to develop some of these standards, or to at least get it to be a more common area of focus and see if we can move it along faster, because I think we're all impatient, right? We all would like it to be over. We'd like to be out on the other side, but it's only going to work if we can all work together on it. So I'll stop there to see what kinds of questions and comments we have from you in our lively audience. We'd like to see some engagement from you and what questions and concerns you have or clarifications about any of this.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Judy and Rod and Gaynor. And we do have quite a few questions and comments coming in. I've got 3 different chat channels in different windows. So let me see if I can pull these together. The first one, Judy, is from Wayne Syme from the Association of Learned and Scholarly ALPSP, the Association of Learned and Professional Society Publishers, so a trade association. And he says, with regards to OA agreements, I'm hearing from some society publishers that it is challenging and time-consuming to get and retain the attention of libraries and consortia. Perhaps these relationships need to scale in some different way. I think there's a need for basic minimum standards, echoing your call, Judy, on how OA agreements are operationalized, as smaller players can't possibly compete on a level playing field with the larger ones. Thank you for that, Wayne. We've also got a question from Ramini Kubilius. I hope I've got your pronunciation right there. This, I think, is a question for Gaynor and Rod. What drives societies more in your open access initiatives? Is it your members, your boards, and so forth? Or is it a competitive spirit You know, you're competing against other societies. What motivates you on open access?
Do you want to go first, Rod, or should
I'm happy to go first. Thanks, Alicia. Thanks for that question. I think mission first. You know, we represent a community. We're an international association in a field where there are many national associations in the US. There's the American Waterworks Association. There's various other US associations. What we do is try and bring those associations and the research together. I think the thing we want to do is try and allow the research to travel as far as it can go and really bring interesting work from one country to another country. And part of that is, you know, is good research from, you know, wealthy, well-researched, well-funded countries to lower and middle income countries, but also it's just sharing different research because there are different approaches in different places, and we want that flow of research to work. And, you know, yes, there's a competitive component that we would like our journals to do well and to be seen to do well. But I think more than that, we're conscious the world is changing. You know, journals like ours didn't change a great deal for 50 years after the Second World War. You know, they were print journals until the internet came along. They were very familiar. If you look at a volume of one of our older journals from 1970, it won't look radically different in 1990. But the world is changing quite rapidly now, and we want to make sure we can actually meet people's needs today. I think those are our motivating factors.
I would agree. I suppose I would just add to it that, you know, we've all sort of made huge strides in digital publishing, and open access really facilitates much more collaborative research. It's what authors want. It's what funders want. You know, it would be completely counter to our mission not to be pushing forward with open access. However, it's not a simple equation, because even though we are in a subject where there is a lot of funded research, and we have a degree of the content that we publish is supported through APCs, that's not universally the case. And there is a real problem and a real issue with a model that is reliant on authors having to not just administer it, but having to have the funding. We have one of our journals, for instance, that has characteristics of a kind of a humanities journal, you know, where there is no funding in it. And so, you know, there's a lot of sympathy for societies that don't operate in medical health science sort of fields, who don't have the luxury that we have of funding to support open access. So we're trying to get it right with something that balances those two competing factors. We want to go open access, but we don't want to disenfranchise those authors that don't have the means to pay.
And I know the question was addressed to the publishers, but I'd like to speak briefly to it as well, which is that the motivation of our researchers is to get the widest possible distribution of their research, and particularly any of our research that affects developing countries and other areas where there are barriers to the access to the information that we have done the research and want to get out to them. So I think there's an enormous motivation on our side as well to reduce any barriers to access, and the APCs and publishing fees of various sorts have become a barrier. And as you say, the authors are often having to choose, and when they don't choose open access, it's largely because they don't have access to the funding for the APCs.
Thank you for that, Judy. And just picking up on the importance of open access, including in low and middle income countries, I wonder if I could ask Rod to say something about the recent announcement of an agreement with IFL that covers researchers in those sorts of places. Can you give us just a quick overview?
Yeah, sure. Alicia has been a very helpful intermediary in the agreement you mentioned with IFL, which I think affects 28 countries at a broad level, and it means that our journals will be completely free to read in all of those countries. Anyone that publishes open access in those countries won't pay any APCs to publish, and their articles will be open access. So it's the same structure as a read and publish agreement. It's a sort of all you can eat, as it were, on the open access publication side. But it's very much there as a capacity building facilitation agreement. We were having this conversation before we thought about subscribe to open, so we have parallel paths going for how do we try and cover all the ground we want to cover and sort of reach everyone. But I think our general approach is we're very pleased to work with Research for Life. We're very pleased to work with IFL as well. All the organizations that can help us really get the word spread and take research to where it belongs. We're very happy to work with those people.
Awesome. And it's a mold breaking agreement, and really great to see society publishers walking the talk. Brilliant. Rod, while you've got the microphone, there are two questions for you specifically. One is how you're managing any financial loss in the transition to subscribe to open, I suppose, or OA more generally. And second, do you promote subscribe to open amongst your authors? And if so, what do they think about this?
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. And thanks for the question, Lisa, about the financial component. We do generate a surplus from our publishing. Our view was we just generate less surplus. That was the outcome there. So the money simply went down into us making a smaller profit going forward. It's possible that the journal grows in future and we get back towards where we were, but I think for IWA Publishing, for our board, we want to find ways to make open access work, and we were happy for there to be a price associated with that in that particular case. I think one of the questions it threw up for us was hydrology research isn't our biggest journal. If we look at our biggest journal and we did the equivalent, that would be a much more difficult burden to bear. There's an ability we have to engineer changes, but there are some changes which are just outside our capability. We just can't manage those, and that is the appeal of subscribe to open. And Navena, thank you for your question. Yeah, we are getting the word out generally on subscribe to open. We haven't got to the point of talking to authors specifically yet. We're kind of working through library channels and sort of all of our existing consortia partners, members of the association, and so forth. We would like to talk to authors, so I would actually like to know the answer to your question myself, but that's a future piece of work for us.
Gaynor, have you engaged with your authors about your transition plans, and do you have feedback from them?
We have done a lot of that. So interestingly, when we first launched it, and bear in mind, this was all, we were sort of slightly making it up as we went along. And one of the things that we learned very early on is the sensitivity around asking libraries to be a marketing conduit for some of this thing. And you can understand absolutely perfectly why. We had the practical issue of not actually being able to reach the full range of researchers who potentially would benefit from Publish and Read. So all we could do is work with our own author data. And yes, we have done several rounds of mailing. And again, we needed to be very sensitive to that, because if there's one thing we learned very quickly from members, from editorial board members, from reviewers, that there's a lot of spam going around constantly about submitting, contributing, so, and we really have never ever done that, and we didn't want to sort of move into that space of constantly emailing about the program. So we've taken an approach which is that we will tell our authors, our members know through various channels. We've been very much more active, I think, through our marketing channels in highlighting the benefits for researchers. But going back again to the librarian role, we are now also spending an equal amount of time trying to talk to institutions that have signed up for Publish and Read, and to work with those institutions through their OA outreach champions, through their research managers, as well as through their librarians. Because I think that's one thing that we're learning, that it's a more complicated picture in the library field, with the number of people and stakeholders that are involved in the institution themselves. So we're just learning how to best support them to make this a success in their institutions.
And I think that's another opportunity for us to collaborate, because we can communicate with our authors without appearing to be spam. And we do communicate with our authors about any number of agreements that we have that get them discounts on their APCs, or in the case of these agreements, actually remove the APCs. It's to our benefit that they know that we have taken these steps on their behalf. And so that's another very logical place for us to be partners and to have a mutual interest in making sure that the contribution of the library to their ability to publish their research is acknowledged.
Awesome. I'm loving the power here of the combination of research libraries and society publishers. Brilliant. We have a comment from Johan Rorik, who's the Executive Director of Coalition S, who says, Coalition S is delighted to know that this necessary conversation between libraries and small publishers is beginning on OA topics of shared interest. And he asks, is there a need for standards to be developed between libraries and these small publishers so that these OA agreements become easier to administer? I think you would.
I think that's a one-word answer. Absolutely yes. So 2 words. But yes, it is needed.
Brilliant.
I think we all agree on that. And I think, Judy, maybe you mentioned counter before. There are definitely some precedents for where publishers and librarians and other folk have come together and worked out what's the information we need to share, what's useful for all the partners, and come up with standards. And I think that will be a fantastic way to go. It really, it's the kind of information that people want to know is, in my university, how many authors do you have? And, were they corresponding authors, which journals? It's not particularly complicated information, but when you try and map it together and then try and map it against what the university knows versus what a publisher knows, the number of differences that come out of who knows where, it is a very, very time consuming and complicated task, and standards that can bring that together and systematize that would be a fantastic help for everyone.
And you'd probably be surprised at how little we do know, because we're a very large decentralized university. And so I think one of the reasons you get asked a lot of those questions is because it's not easy for us to get that information in another way. But again, trying to determine what's the minimum that we absolutely have to have in order to move forward. And then, to the extent that we can over time do more, or to the extent that we can use the information you do provide for us to then contact our own authors and follow up with them and get the additional information that we need at home instead of expecting you to deliver it to us, I think would be important.
Brilliant. We have a suggestion by Peter Berkery from the Association of University Presses, who asks, I wonder whether there's an opportunity to create a kit or a template to streamline the negotiation process along the lines of the Mellon-funded OA monographed publishing agreement project spearheaded by Emory University a couple of years ago. What do you think of that idea? And can you think of other concrete ways to get some traction in this space to move forward together?
Well, I would say that absolutely, the Toolkit is the way to go. And Alicia, your great work early on in getting us all together and providing that toolkit was invaluable. We would have really faltered. I think most of us who participate in the Society Publishers Coalition and started our first agreements have all used that toolkit. It was fabulously helpful, and it needs refinement and work because it works, but there's still an awful lot of kind of reinventing the wheel that keeps going on. I absolutely agree with Judy. You know, we need some sort of more minimum standards, really, that everybody can understand that they must just sign up in a simple form and not try and dot every I and cross every T that there is to. And the only other thing that I would say is that inherently there is a bit of complexity here, because there is never just the two stakeholders, there's also funders, and you need to bring in some of that information as well. The fact is that I think all publishers, most of the small publishers that I can think of, certainly all the ones in the Society Publishers Coalition, do collect that information, collect the funder information, you know, have it there. So it's just really a case of packaging it, really, I think, is what I would say.
Well, it's intriguing too to think that we have a potential partnership for university presses, who are also in their own way, for the most part, small publishers when you compare them to the really large commercial publishers, and who are, there's really a common interest there, and there's a common interest from us because we acquire content from both of them. So again, any commonality that can be identified, any common set of both language for agreements, but also data that will be shared, I think would be really helpful to us as we acquire these things and want to participate in them.
And on the Transformative Agreement Toolkit, we found that very useful. We have taken advantage of that. It's good for organizing data. It's helpful for framing agreements. You know, it helps us do those decisions. And I think, as you say, Gaynor, you know, you kind of want a very simple thing that lots of people can sign up for. And whether that is the principles of an agreement, the elements of an agreement that could be adopted by, you know, groups and say, you know, yes, we're happy with these principles, you know, or if it's actually kind of text that you can go off and use in an agreement, which takes you into areas of complexity, like the same agreement in the Netherlands looks rather different to an agreement in the US, to Canada, to Australia. You know, the details of you know, different laws do make that complicated, but where we can come together and have a set of fundamental, you know, elements that people all agree we want these in agreements, you know, that I think is helpful for everyone. And that, I think that is the kind of initiative that could be endorsed by, you know, some of the larger groups, some of the larger entities within funding within the library world, and sort of allow people to sign up and show that they support certain ways of streamlining these discussions.
Excellent. Thank you all for that. We have a question from Johan Rourke, the Executive Director of Coalition S. What's the best way for Coalition S funders to facilitate this strategic dialogue between libraries and small publishers, university presses and society publishers, I assume is meant here? Is it a convening power? I mean, is there a vast need for funding? I don't think I'm hearing that. I'm thinking facilitation. And
I would say that some of the initiatives that have already taken place through the start and through the setting up of bringing people together in working groups is extraordinarily powerful. I think it helped when we had the conversation with you, Judy. I think it helped when we had the conversation with some of the European funders. Bringing all those parties to the table is so useful, I think, and communicating it. It then requires, and I think the Society Publishers Coalition has helped us work as together and collaboratively to really put forward a sort of a united group of thinking of how we move forward. And if that could somehow be replicated on the library, the institutional side, that would be tremendous. But I think I do think it requires that sort of working together in groups that can then perhaps cascade out to their own communities.
The US may be a particular challenge because we are so decentralized.
Yes.
So a number of the agreements that you all mentioned, your early agreements, were with a country or a I mean, I think we make your life more difficult because we are more decentralized, and yet we have an enormous body of research that's being done and funders who are also committed to open access. So there's a motivation to move forward, but maybe some particular challenges. How many people do you have to get to the table, and at what point is it almost too big a group to be manageable? So trying to think about some sort of starting point that's reasonable that then can expand out. So I like Rod's comment about principles. I mean, I think that's something that is a really good starting point. I agree the laws from country to country, state to state here in the US certainly make it more difficult to have truly template language for agreements, but I think there are, we've worked through a number of library groups with standard language about interlibrary loan, about ADA, about other kinds of things. We have experience doing this with things that matter to us. So I think we can band together and have those conversations, and I'm certainly happy, and I hope some of our audience are happy to kind of say that, you know, we're happy to begin those conversations locally and try to bring them up into some more broad groups that could actually move this forward.
No, I agree with both. Sorry, Alicia. Both what you said, Judy and Gaynor. I mean, I think a small, compact working group, not too many people, enough people that could all talk together, could come up with a set of principles. And then I think there's a second activity, which would be then taking those principles out into the wider community and very much listening to the feedback. You know, I think countries that have changed difficult laws, like some of the referenda that Ireland have done recently, I think you can get a core of here's what we think is workable, but you then need to take that to the people that will actually implement it and use it. And if they come back and say, you've missed 3 of the most important things, I think that needs to be listened to and it needs to be revised. So I think it will be an iterative process, but the best way to start it will be a small core working party, I think, and then actually go out into the real world and see if people would be happy to sign up for it or if it needs to be changed.
I'm so sorry that we're at the end of our time together, because this has been a lively discussion. We've had really thoughtful comments from our speakers and great engagement in the various chats. Thank you all very much indeed. And what an exciting sort of vision has begun to hatch here for how we can further moving forward together. So let's work together to get some traction now that the discussion is finished. Thank you all ever so much. Enjoy your weekend. And thank you, Judy, Rod, and Gaynor very much indeed for preparing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Charles.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Very interesting. Thank you all.